Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. And I have a very interesting guest with me, Sir Paul Flynn, who is a product of love and not war. And he will share a little bit about his journey. But in his professional life, Sir Paul is the founder and board chairman of GRO Foundation, a global non-profit dedicated to the environmental and social impact space. So Paul is based in London, in the UK. So Paul, welcome to Living with Purpose.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here.
Share a little bit about you as a product of Irish and Ugandan meeting together and falling in love. That to me is just such an excellent story. So share a little bit about that and why are you doing what you're doing? So talk a little bit about your journey.
When I was born, I was still very, very rare. I'm indeed a product of a London party. My mother is Ugandan and born in the 50s, so she lived through the turmoil of Ugandan independence when the British left. And she was a student demonstrator demonstrating against Idi Amin's tanks in Uganda. My father, also born in the 50s, he was a student demonstrator during the independence of Northern Ireland. And in both cases, my respective grandmothers one day pulled them by the ear and said, "You are far too loud. Please leave." Basically, the product of wars and demonstrations. But they met within 2 weeks. Both my parents arrived in London and they both knew the same war journalist. So they met at a party in London within 2 weeks of arriving. And they decided, let's make love, not war. And that's me.
So Paul Flynn, this is absolutely amazing that so many people around the world get these opportunities. And you were clearly born of this incredible opportunity, which you have seized. But then you also mentioned that you were born in Germany.
So I'm Irish, that's the freckles. I was born in the early 80s. So that was simply the growth market of the time. And my parents moved to Germany. And by coincidence, that's where I was born. And at the time, Germany was growing. Both worked in international trade. Born in Germany. I was educated in Netherlands, Scandinavia, all over the place. But funny enough, my very first memories actually are from back in Africa. So my entire life, my parents have been going back to Uganda, growing up there. So my very, very earliest memories. So I grew up going to Africa frequently. And just because of the contrast, even as a child, I understood that. Then German culture and Irish culture. We were in Ireland several times a year. I just basically grew up understanding that every country has a different version of the truth. From being a small child, I understood cultural difference and that what people think is right or wrong is different wherever you go. So I became very good at speaking the language of different cultures and becoming a bridge between them. Because from the earliest childhood, Germany, very, very strict and very, very punctual and very, very accurate. But in Ireland, very, very laid back and very, very relaxed, but strictly Catholic. Yeah, so very, very strict on that side, but very relaxed on other sides. Uganda, that was at the time a very, very poor place. But their family ties were still very strong. They still believe in kingdoms and traditions. That's still very, very much alive. Tribal culture. And I just understood that, perspective and facts, they move a lot more than people sometimes imagine. So I grew up multilingual in culture. That's what got me here today.
You are clearly the epitome of a global citizen. Somebody biracial, bicultural, comfortable moving in different communities, contexts, cultures. But you also mentioned that your parents kind of went into international trade.
Yes.
So they started off as rebels.
I think at heart they would still say they are.
Right? And then they went into something very prosaic as international trade.
Yes.
But then here you are, a change maker.
I try every day.
You became so focused on reforestation, food security, water access. Talk a little bit about your journey growing up and what you're doing now.
That's a really good question. So again, with growing up between cultures, I still have family in Uganda, I have family in Ireland, I have family in Germany. My sister married a Persian, she's in Australia. My brother married a Polish girl. He has a blonde daughter. I have a blue-eyed son. So there's a real mix there. But my entire life, I was going back to Uganda, and we are part of the diaspora. From the age of 2, I watched my family send money to Africa for charity, for help, because somebody was sick, because somebody needed a loan to start a business. So my entire life, I've been seeing money flow from the rich West into developing economies, primarily Uganda and sometimes to Kenya. And I've seen my life from what works and what doesn't work. So with 16, with my very first own paycheck, I sent my first money to Africa myself to co-fund some of the school fees of one of my cousins. So since the age of 16, since I've been earning money, I've been sending money back. But I've seen how charity doesn't work very, very often because it doesn't change the lives of the people that are there. It only helps in the moment. But then a day, a week, a month, or a few months later, the people are still in the same situation. So they will need help again. So I've been thinking, how can you truly create change with people? I detoured for a while. So my background is in business law. I've been structuring securities. My father said, if you want to look after people, don't learn history, learn something real. So I was in management consulting for a while. I was very lucky, again, with intercultural ties. I worked for the British government for a while in a private-public partnership. So I learned to structure securities in the government sector for big markets. It was offshore.
Right.
That's not what I do today, but I learned at one point within the offshore wind sector, I was reporting to the First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond at the time, in a very niche specialist team. But we're handling hundreds of millions of pounds at the time. And I was just a compliance writer. And then from that, I had the offer to start with hedge funds and consulting, which I earned some money with. But I had the opportunity to be either sent after I did a contract within the UK. I had the opportunity to be working in New York and Wall Street in financial markets, but government sector work. But I voluntarily had myself sent to the British High Commission in Kenya because I wanted to go back to Africa. And I worked on the government side there. I was there for a while, earning tax-free money, as you do in a government consulting role. I was in my early 30s, and I decided this is not what I want to do. I don't want to work for governments and hedge funds and make a lot of money for other people. I wanted to try and use my skills to create value for the communities that are actually there because they're too poor to create their own businesses. And usually hedge funds create through debt, create businesses, but they're extracting a lot of value rather than creating value on the ground. So a decade ago, I quit everything. I quit a very, very comfortable 6-figure job and said I'd try to use what I know to give back. And I was lucky enough that this is when the carbon certificate sector started off. So I have been working, again, the carbon sector, net zero, creating a cleaner environment, planting trees to take carbon emissions out of the air, which now companies under the United Nations protocol need to buy. I was lucky enough to be exactly at the right time with the right skills to create projects in this sector. That's what I'm doing today. Rather than doing this for hedge funds, I was offered $1 million just to work for a hedge fund. I took the risk. I'm very happy that I was brave enough to do that. I said no to that, and instead I'm working in partnership with the Interreligious Council of Uganda and East Africa. I'm working with the Council of Kings, so in partnership. So right now I'm helping grassroots communities create carbon projects that plant millions of trees. I do all the certification work to create carbon certificates. And basically that's what companies pay for in order to become carbon neutral, taking waste away. Companies, through the industrial processes, create carbon emissions and they put them into the air. I plant trees with communities that take carbon emissions out of the air at the biggest scale than anybody else because we're working with the communities themselves. This is certified through a United Nations process which you can sell to companies, and now they become carbon neutral. It's taking away their waste. Hedge fund would take this into profits. I basically turned charity on its head. So instead, I now have a product that companies need, and this money I use to fund water security, food security, education and skills training, and microfinance to create grassroots jobs in the countries that we're working in. So rather than a traditional charity that says, oh, please give me a few dollars so I can do something good over here, I create a registered and insurable financial product which we sell on the global market to companies. And this becomes our source of income to then create impact.
This whole carbon sequestration and carbon credits have become such a interesting financial model
Yes.
for impacting certain aspects of carbon emission, right? And
Yes.
this is regulatory now. This is required for companies to do. You are providing these opportunities. Talk a little bit about where do you work? I mean, you mentioned Uganda. Are you working anywhere else outside of Uganda?
Right now we're scaling. So we're now fully certified under the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention. I'm a consultant, a host country consultant. So within East Africa, we help governments now structure their own regulations, primarily Uganda and Kenya. But we've been invited because we work with the Council of Kings and the Interreligious Council. I mean, they exist in all African countries. Our goal, my personal goal, my hope and wish is that as we grow, we're able to help more and more countries and the communities in these countries to duplicate what we're doing. Other companies create a firewall to protect their knowledge. But I want to teach as many countries as possible to enter the global market, get that money to then reinvest in themselves. So we're active in Uganda and Kenya, but we have invitations to 14 countries across East Africa. Our board has the vice chairman of the Interreligious Council for all of Africa. So we have that access. Just a few weeks ago, I was at an event of the African Union. So we're really at the heart. We have all the agreements with the ministries, with the governments, and we want to expand. The trick in growing is doing something very, very simple, very, very often. At the moment, we have the land to plant nearly 1 billion trees. So over the next 10 years, we want to plant 1 billion trees. And that in itself is impossible. The logistics, the planning, the complication of that's impossible. But planting one tree is a very, very easy task. So what we mastered is to plant one tree 1 billion times. So we're not optimizing for performance. We're not optimizing for profits, which traditional hedge funds would do. We're optimizing to maximize the impact for communities on the ground. And that's what gives us the momentum to scale trees. So we get the land for free from kingdoms. We get the land for free from religious institutions. We work directly with the ministries, simply because, I like to say, be kind to strangers for no reason. So the people genuinely believe, I've been there for more than a decade now, because I'm there to help them get better rather than extract what they have. They open all the doors.
What you're saying is just so fascinating. I love the way you kind of, just in this very simple way, change the way we think about scaling. Essentially, business will look at it and say, we want to optimize for planting 1 billion trees. So you now come up with a process of efficiency which gets you to plant 1 billion trees, which you may or may not achieve. But if you actually optimize for effectiveness, which is what you have done in your case, where you're saying, we are going to become an expert in planting one tree.
Yes.
And if we can plant one tree, then rather than scaling, we will actually spread that knowledge so that that knowledge can get spread 1 billion times. And now you
Exactly.
get 1 billion trees planted. Notion of shifting from efficiency to effectiveness is just brilliant. I'm not planting 1 billion trees. I'm actually optimizing to plant one tree repeated 1 billion times.
Yes.
And that to me is just incredibly fascinating. Just give me one example of some impact that you had in one of the communities in Uganda.
So in Uganda, for example, we try to standardize the process. So usually it all starts with a tree nursery where you grow them. And what we usually do is we talk to the women of a community. And actually, I'd use my favorite example where we do a scaling test, which actually in Kenya, because we did the entire process there in a place called Kilifi, which is north of Mombasa, 2,000 hectares of mangrove land that had been deforested. We work in just one village, which we then duplicate that same model everywhere. We have 25 women, which are now increasing to 50 women. We had 25 women that when we started had an average income of $20 a month. That's what they had. We, on day one, we said, listen, we'll set up a tree nursery, in this case mangroves, for you to tend on a full-time position. So now 25 women went from $20 a month to $75 a month, which is above the national income. Now these women collect the seeds of the mangroves, and they, in a tree nursery, a mangrove nursery, raise them for about several months to be ready for planting. Then we work with the men and the youth of the community to plant them every 2-3 weeks. Between 100 and 200 people come to then plant the mangroves. I was there a few weeks ago. In this community, we can routinely plant 10,000 mangroves in an afternoon. Recently, we did 10,000 mangroves in just 2 hours. This moment, last November in the rain season, we did a scaling test and we planted 500,000 trees and mangroves in 6 weeks. So that's the level we are now. And we're just duplicating that same model with different communities. So the women raise up from seed to seedling. Then the men and the youth of the community come on weekends and plant at scale. Some people dig the holes, prepare the area. Then others come and plant those trees. And then other people protect them to make sure they get logged. Now, here's the trick. I never talk about environmental protection to these people. They don't have the issues we have. We're the ones in the West that are polluting the air. They have sunshine and greenness. Now, they plant these trees for 2 reasons. Number one, they usually cut down trees. It's a sign of poverty. We create alternative wood food sources. So we plant trees and bamboo that they can use for firewood, charcoal, building material. Now, these trees are not part of the carbon project. The carbon project is within a forest reserve. And so they help us plant the trees because, number one, we've increased, doubled or tripled their income for women of the community. This guarantees all the school wages. So just this community has nearly 150 children whose school fees are paid because of our project. Then the entire community, on average, nearly doubles their income simply by planting part-time on the weekends. That doubles their income. But now comes the impact. We then fund food and water security projects. So we've put money into fish farms through microfinance. So the men and women of the community, they don't help us because we're talking about the environment. They help us because we immediately increase their income on the day and we pay them for the work they've delivered. But then also they have independent income sources for food security. We do water wells and water sanitation, which is water security, and educated to perform for the future. And then last but least, we give them the microfinance to further scale jobs. So the idea is that these communities working with us, when we leave, they have more than what we started with. So these people need a long-term solution to lift them out of poverty. And that's what we achieve with this 4-step method.
This is fantastic. What you're doing is just absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much for sharing. We have a few minutes. So I want to kind of turn to purpose and the importance of purpose in your life. Why do you think purpose is such an important thing? And how are you going back to purpose to help you when times get tough? Clearly, everything that you're doing is not easy to do.
That too is a very good question. I believe that it is important for every person to recognize and find their inner strength. So, I had good money I was earning. I was in a very, very comfortable job. And initially, I was measuring my success by career, by promotions, by financial bonuses. And then I recognized, number one, how much money do I actually need to live? How much money do I need to look after my wife, to look after my children? I identified the number. And I chose to measure my own success not in external rewards, but in internal ones. How do I live my life? How do I control my life? What do I need to live the life that I can lead, that I want to lead? And that for me is family time and helping other people basically become independent. Helping to end poverty gives you a lot of gratitude. It's a very rewarding feeling to actually be able to help people. So because I know I am doing this job voluntarily, I know I don't need an external reward. Everything is from inside. And because the strength is in inner strength, if a project gets delayed, if a contract doesn't work out, these are all external things. Oh, money didn't come in. Oh, there's stress because a project is burning or on fire, or because some supplier or partner didn't deliver. None of this matters because the purpose that I have is to improve the lives of children. So it doesn't matter how I get there. Most people make the mistake that they believe they need to enjoy their job or have their dream job to do something. But my happiness and my gratitude comes from the results that I create through the job that I do. So I don't get stressed or burdened by difficulties at work because that is simply the process I have to go to. So I think connecting to your inner self and finding the life you want to lead, that is the purpose, and that gives you the inner strength. And then nothing can stop you because our soul is indestructible and the fire inside us is infinite. And when people recognize that, then no hardship can stop them.
Yeah, this is such a fantastic way to kind of summarize really the importance of purpose. That purpose is really that inner strength, and that if you can articulate and identify your strengths and values and show up with that with everything that you do, and not just focus on the how, but focus on the why.
Yes.
Things that you may have which might be considered obstacles really start disappearing. So give our listeners your one golden nugget, a word of wisdom that you want to leave behind.
Yes. Remember what I said earlier on, that planting 1 billion trees is impossible. But planting one tree 1 billion times is very easy. Planting one tree is something any child can do. The same way I think changing the world is impossible. But changing your world one person at a time is very easy. So what I said earlier on, be kind to strangers for no reason. Smile and give just because you can without expectation of reward. Imagine how beautiful the world would be if everybody just freely gave, hey, if I can help you, why should I not? I don't know you. But if every person was kind to the 5 people he's in contact with every day, the entire world would change overnight. That same principle, be kind to strangers for no reason. Life will be beautiful.
There's such a wonderful way to end, right? That if you change your world to show up with purpose, you can make a world of a difference for everybody else. And if you just find joy in what you do, it's not about being happy at work.
No.
It is actually being joyful and bringing joy in the world, which is a collective experience. Now you can actually shift from just a personal gratification to extending the common good. So, Paul, it's been just fascinating talking with you. We could continue this conversation for a very long time, but thank you very much for being on the podcast of Living with Purpose. Again, purpose is that renewable source of energy that keeps humanity moving forward. Ignite your purpose. In doing so, you can just plant your one tree, and in doing so, you can inspire others to plant that one tree. And then one day we will have the 1 billion trees that are needed, or 100 billion trees that are needed to ensure this world, this pale blue dot, continues to survive. So, Paul, thank you so very much. And thank you to our listeners. Until next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.